And as promised, Dr. Tim McKnight along this morning. And we wanted to talk about telomeres, but that's a little deep as we head into DNA territory. Is that right?
That's right.
And what do they do? I mean, what are they good for?
If you imagine that you've got 23 pairs of chromosomes, and each chromosome is paired with a DNA strand, on the end of those chromosomes, you have what we call these end caps. And the end caps, just think of a shoestring on a tennis shoe. And at the end of the shoestring, you've got this plastic cap that
the eaglet.
I guess that's what it's called. The eaglet prevents it from coming unraveled. Right? You have that's the telomere on your chromosomes, on the ends of our genes. And every time the cell divides, it's like somebody's taking that end cap, that plastic cap on a shoestring, and just clipping off the very end of it, the smallest amount. So each time you clip that a little bit further to get closer to no more protective covering, and of course the shoelace will then start to unravel and fall apart.
Right.
That's what the chromosomes do. That's what the genes do. And so when you get to that point where it's beginning to unravel, that's when the aging process accelerates really rapidly. And that's when you see somebody, and a year or two later, you see they've really declined. They're not very active. They're not really cognitive well. And you can tell that their life is winding down. So and we can measure the rate at which those telomeres shorten, and that's what predicts the aging process. So when you see a TV show that says, well, physiologically or chronologically you're 48, but physiologically you're 63, you're aging 15 years faster than you should, it means that they've measured those telomeres and the rate that they're dividing and shortening, and they can predict that your lifespan is going to be shorter based on that. And
I am assuming a lot of this is hereditary.
Well, that's the interesting thing about it. There is a hereditary component, but we know that most chronic diseases only have about a 5% genetic contribution. So, yes, we see some diseases and conditions more in certain families, but some of that's because the family is in the environment that causes those genes to change. And we've talked about that in the past, that it's not the genes that dictate our health and our longevity. It's the environment that we put those genes in. Because you can have identical twins. DNA is completely the same. Put them in two completely environments and come back in 30 years and you're going to see two different people. Mm-hmm. You're going to measure two different types of blood tests. So it really is the environment, and we call that epigenetics. The environmental pressure is what causes the healthy genes to thrive or the telomeres to shorten quickly and to cause the rapid acceleration of aging. So one of the studies that I looked at previously in Fit for Life was published several years ago in the current opinion of clinical nutritional metabolism care. And this article was specifically about telomeres, lifestyle, cancer, and aging. So they were going to look at these telomeres and how fast they shorten, how fast the end of the shoestrings get cut to the point of no plastic covering. And some pretty interesting conclusions with this. So we know the faster that those telomeres shorten, the faster the aging process. But then they looked at some of the cofactors that can cause this. So things like age, genetics, epigenetics, which I was talking about, environmental pressures, social and economic status have a role in how fast you age, exercise, body weight, smoking, and diet. And a couple of these I thought were particularly interesting. One was obesity. When they looked at obesity, we know that when you're obese, the more weight you carry, especially in your belly, the more inflammation you have and oxidative stress. And they calculated, looking at thousands of people, that the rapid decline of telomeres in obese people will shorten their age on average almost 9 years, 8.8 years. That's pretty remarkable. So it just tells you that when you're obese and you have inflammation, it's hard on the body and it makes you age quicker. Interesting that someone who smokes a pack a day for 40 years, so we call that a 40-pack-year history of tobacco use, they lose on average 7.5 years. They shorten their life 7.5 years. So actually, if you want to choose obesity or smoking as far as longevity, you might live a little bit longer if you smoke, but I wouldn't recommend that either.
Isn't that somewhat ironic, though? I mean,
it is ironic, and unfortunately, either way, you're probably going to suffer.
Yeah.
With obesity, you're going to have likely knee issues or hip issues or heart issues, diabetes. But with smoking, you have all the breathing issues and all those other problems. So neither of those are good lifestyles. Here's another really interesting one that blew my mind away. the role of stress. Now, people think stress is mental. Well, yeah, it begins in the mind with thoughts and emotions, but those emotions trigger physiological changes in the cells, and the cells get stressed. And if you don't manage that stress in the nutrition and rest and healthy hormones that they need, they'll suffer. So they said that in this study, one of the conclusions was women exposed to stress in their daily life had evidence of increased oxidative stress and shorter telomeres. Okay, so women under stress, and that's going to be a lot of women raising children and working and going through all the things that a lot of women go through. It has the equivalent of shortening their life by 10 years.
Ooh.
So we've got stress, we've got smoking, and we've got obesity. And stress is the one that shortens it quicker than any, or more impactful than any of those three. So that just tells us how important it is to manage stress. So then we come to food intake, and they, people that have. Well, let me just go down the list of things that will cause us. We'll summarize this: things that will cause us to age faster. Most of these are not surprising: smoking, obesity, lack of exercise, stress, and unhealthy diets, particularly diets that have too much protein. We are not carnivores. We are not flesh-eating beings. We should be eating more plants than flesh. But, they just published a study or a report on the keto diet causing more risk of heart disease. So the keto diet, which is a lot of animal meats, is probably not good, but, it kind of makes sense. So excess protein intake, low fiber diets. Well, low fiber diets are just processed foods. You're eating them out of bags and boxes and processed foods, fast foods. High fiber diets are the opposite. That's when you get eating all the foods in the produce section, and then just too many calories. So unhealthy diets are excess protein, low fiber diets, and too much caloric intake. So now we want to know, okay, how do I slow the aging process down? Well, here are the things that you do to slow it down. Increase your fiber intake. And I always tell people, you don't necessarily have to take fiber supplements or Metamucil. What you need to do is get your fiber in your foods. And again, we're back to the produce section. Chew those foods up well. That our tooth structure our teeth look like a cow's teeth. It doesn't look like a cat's teeth. We should be chewing plants and chewing on nuts and those kind of things.
Ironically, my cat chews plants, but that's a whole different
Well, you might
thing.
have a really smart a cat then. Who knows? Let's see how long your cat lives. So that's where you should get your fiber intake. And if you get your fiber intake, fiber is also really good at helping you get rid of things in your stool that are toxic. So if the toxins can bind onto the fiber and help it be eliminated. So
you mentioned the Metamucil. Isn't that mostly corn fiber that they use in those things?
That's a good question. I'm not sure exactly what the fiber type is in there. I know it tastes like orange tang, and to me it tastes good. Well, kind of, yeah. I it's not bad for me.
Okay.
And then there's the polyunsaturated fats, which are really good. Now, the polyunsaturated fats can be things like vegetable oils, which most of us get too much of those because corn oil and safflower oil and sunflower oil and all those are really, really high in omega-6 fatty acids, and they're inflammatory when we eat them in excess. It's okay to eat some, but we should get those in the foods. We should get that in the sunflower seeds and not in sunflower oil, or in eating corn and not with corn oil. So, but the healthier polyunsaturated fats would be things like olive oil, canola oil, and those type of fats. And those are actually monounsaturated fats. And then another key dietary variable or emphasis should be low protein diets. And people really worry about this. If I'm not having a sandwich at lunch and some meat and potatoes at dinner, how am I going to get my protein? How are my kids going to grow, and how am I going to stay healthy and heal from a surgery or an injury? And we can get protein in whole grains. We can get protein in nuts and seeds. We can get it in beans. We can get it in a little bit of eggs, and we can get it in some meats. But I think we need to just slow down the animal flesh intake. It's just more than we need. And people have, unfortunately, I think it's the Beef Council and the Dairy Council that's sold us this idea that we got to consume all these products, and it's not based on really good science. So don't worry too much about the protein intake. Exercise, and we could talk a lot about the different types of exercise,
Yeah.
but for most people, just get out and walk.
Yeah.
Start with that, right? Do something that you enjoy doing. Don't make it something overwhelming or difficult to do. Diets rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which I mentioned, those are going to be in your green leafy vegetables and some of those other foods, as well as fish oils. Diets rich in antioxidants, and those antioxidants are found in colorful fruits and vegetables. Berries are a great source. Green leafy vegetables, all those things. Again, we're looking at the produce section, and then a low calorie intake. And most people don't do very well with that.
Yeah, well.
Most people think you need 3, 4, or 5 meals a day or snacking all day. And really, if we follow the animal kingdom, they're not eating on a timer. They're eating when food's available and when they're hungry and they can get it. We would do well. In fact, people who live to be 100 do 2 things. They grow their own foods, and they walk 3 to 5 miles a day. So those are the things that can slow down the aging process. And again, this is not new. This doesn't sound new to anybody.
Right.
But to understand where this comes from, when you see all these reports on TV that you're this age chronologically, but we're estimating that you're closer to this age.
So really, these telomeres are reflecting what's being put in them, like a computer.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And that's the point of this. It's epigenetics. It's the environment that's triggering the changes in our DNA. And boy, we could talk about this for a long time, because they've done really cool studies just on obesity. So they had 2 identical twins, humans, and one became obese and the other one was lean. And they said, well, okay, how'd that happen? Well, it's the environment. They had the same genes. They changed the expression of their genes by the foods they ate, which was partly why they were obese. And then they took the stool from the healthy lean twin versus stool from the obese twin, and they had groups of mice, same strain, everything was the same with these mice, and they put a little bit of the feces, they injected it into the gut or the rectum of these mice, and then the mice had everything the same exercise, same water, same food. And the mice that received the stool from the obese individual became obese. So what that was telling us is the stool from the obese human had an imbalance of bacteria that was more obese promoting, and it got into the gut, and then it expressed bacteria in the gut of the mice and made them obese. So just one example of how our body changes quickly to the environment. And I could show you really cool pictures of the gut, how the gut changes microscopically within 24 hours of the type of food you put into it. Junk food, fast food versus produce section food. And the same with the arterial lining. It's not something we see, so we're like, well, okay, I ate healthy today, but I don't feel any better. But if you could see what's happening microscopically, you would be impressed, and you'd probably want to keep doing that. So one other really interesting point I wanted to mention with this telomere study is maybe a little bit beyond this, but there's also another study that looked at what does it take to live 100 or beyond. So they looked at things like, okay, clean air. What does the role of clean air have? How about, are you treating your blood pressure? How about the role of being lean versus overweight? How does that help us predict who's going to live to be over 100? They looked at exercise. They looked at flu vaccines, quitting drinking, quitting smoking, close relationships. And the most important variable in predicting who's going to live to be 100 years was social interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that amazing? Those people that get out and then they interact with other people, and usually those are fun interactions. They're out, they're senior citizen center, they're walking and interacting, and they're in clubs, and they're going to church or whatever where they're interacting with people. That is powerful, and you see a lot of people who just say, I just want to retire, I want to relax, I'm just going to kind of take it easy, and they spend all the time in their recliner, and it's not healthy, but there's interactions, and you'll see that in churches. You go to a church, and who are the people there? The 80, 90-year-old women, and they're doing things. They're serving luncheons and those kind of things. So that's just one other. It's not really related to the telomeres, but I think it's really interesting when we look at how to live a long, healthy, enjoyable life.
Right.
It's to stay in touch with people.
I think that's very good. And like you said, in serving them, that's going to keep you interacting and feeling even better.
I think so. It's a pretty simple one.
Well, Dr. McKnight, thank you so much. I hope we have this conversation in 50 or 60 years from now.
We'll see who's doing a better job with their telomeres.
That's our talk with the doc this morning.